The world is becoming an ever more volatile and unpredictable place. Every day, it feels like the gulfs are widening between different ages, races, genders, religions, those who live in cities and the countryside, the haves and the have-nots. Alongside that, in the wake of events like the 2009 financial crisis, crackdown on corruption in China, the election of President Trump, a lot of the global elite seem to be reevaluating how they present themselves to the rest of the world. So how are we, as luxury brands, or you, I should say, are supposed to readdress that? How do you maintain and adopt a new way of managing your relationships with these customers? How do you adapt to their shifting value systems? I've got three people here today who will be able to tell me a lot more. Francesca Bellettini, who is the president and CEO of Saint Laurent. Alexander Gilkes, who is the CEO and co-founder of Paddle 8. And last but not least, Laurent Pancera, who is the global head of ultra-high net worth positioning at UBS. Thanks so much for joining me, you guys. Francesca, I'm going to start with you, because you joined Saint Laurent in 2013, yes. And in the 4 years since then, the brand in the eyes of the world has undergone a total reset, especially in terms of aesthetic. It's moved away from something that people would describe as quite formal, quite elitist, to what people would, I guess, say was a very grungy streetwear. And there's lots of things we can talk about in terms of how you've carved out a new identity for this brand, but let's start with aesthetic and why it was so important to carve out an identity that removed elitism from the equation, I guess.
Well, good morning to everybody, and thank you for having me here. In reality, what we did was going back to the values of the brand. This is a brand that was founded in 1961, and then in 1966 it created Pret-a-Porter, which was exactly the way in which Mr. Saint Laurent and Mr. Berger wanted to break the boundaries and to break the differences between the elite and the street. One of the slogans at that time was "Dress the Street." So what was done was really to go back to the values of the brand. We don't do haute couture anymore in the sense of haute couture. We do Pret-a-Porter. Pret-a-Porter, when the brand was founded, was standing for that. Was created by opening a store on Rive Gauche in Paris, because what Yves Saint Laurent wanted to do was to bring fashion and style to the people. Wanted to create an industrial process into production, wanted to make the brand and the style closer to the people themselves. So what we did was basically going back to the value of the brand and communicating the values of the brand in a very consistent way and in a 360 way, not only with the product, but also with the communication and with the state of mind. And this paid off because people paid the fact that we were authentic. Authenticity means sincerity, so communicating something that is really your own, and those were our values. It has always been a brand that has been rebel, for freedom, standing for your rights, not being afraid of communicating your values, even when you know that you're not going to please everybody, and consistency. That is what is making authenticity. So it's like being authentic and going back has paid off. We did it simply going back to our roots.
We talked a little bit earlier about how the millennials are a particularly politicized generation. Yeah. How important were the millennial demographic to you when you were thinking about this? Were you thinking that in order to attract that customer base, you needed to seem more accessible, more youthful?
Not at all. I don't like stereotypes. I don't like talking about millennials, not millennials. I mean, when you create or design a collection, a creative director doesn't think this product is for a millennial, this product is for an older person. Doesn't work that way. Didn't work that way for us at all. I discovered, honestly, I had a huge millennial share presently. Not that I would have been unhappy not to have it. It's simply a fact that it happened. I think it's happened for various reasons. It's not only for Saint Laurent. A lot of brands are increasing the share of younger consumer, simply because, in my view, luxury is opening up. One key characteristic of what Saint Laurent did was really this, and I think for this we can say we were the first brand. After the crisis, luxury had become, the crisis of 2009, luxury had become incredibly boring, incredibly auto-referential. When I was young myself, I was scared of entering a luxury store. I was thinking about how I had to dress to go and shop luxury. Even if I could, I was an investment banker, I could afford to buy luxury. I was lucky. I didn't go because I felt intimidated. So what we did, when we speak about the value of the brand and becoming modern and living in your epoch, was opening up, making it easier. Our stores first of all, became open. Instead of walls, we put glass. People could see from the outside what we had inside, and there were lots of colleagues, other CEOs who told me, you're crazy, this is not luxury, why people should enter if they can see everything from the outside? Well, because of that. But it's not that we did it because we were targeting the millennial. We did it because the values of our brand were that, because we wanted to be modern and stay relevant, communicating our values. So we opened up. Younger generations now are less intimidated by fashion. Thanks to social media, the barriers have been broken. They communicate with each other. So it's a dual factor. And the more this happens, the more you're cautious about the fact that they are part of your consumer base. You get to know them, but it's not that you change who you are because you need to sell to millennials. I want to sell to all of clients. And actually what we had in mind when we did the change was more a way of being. If you ask me which of your clients are millennial, in their mentality, 100%, because of what we stand. Then age is a secondary factor in my personal point of view.
This would be a good point to bring Alexander in, because I guess the idea of breaking down the intimidation factor in luxury was probably what drove you in a way to launch Padelait. You know, you've been part of the old guard art world, you were formerly the chief auctioneer at Philips, and then went on to launch Padelait. What drove you to do that launch? What niche in the market did you see?
I mean, I think, ultimately from the sort of the 10,000-foot view, we saw a few key opportunities and paradigm shifts. I mean, ultimately you were seeing that there was a new foray of entrance into the market. I mean, I think it goes back to sort of the collaborations of Mondrian and Yves Saint Laurent, to most recently Marc Jacobs and Murakami, that was bringing artworks finally back into the shop window. Secondly, you had this sort of new validation whereby art was the epicenter of the cultural Venn diagram. You're seeing sort of Lady Gaga collaborate with Jeff Koons for the cover of Art Pop. That meant there was a new fray of interest coming in through art, through music, through fashion, through architecture. And they didn't really have a place to go, these new entrants to the market. There was also just the fact that the established guard, the old guard, and the auction houses were yet to, well, they'd really sort of undermined the importance of the advent of online, and how such an intellectual good and a tactile good as art could be approached via such a sort of sterile medium as the internet, but hadn't really sort of seen how the likes of Net-a-Porter and stuff had created context and trust and elevation of experience. And beyond that, there was also it was a very fragmented market. The middle market was run by sort of 1,500 small regional auction houses, mum and pop stores. So there was an opportunity for consolidation. And finally, dogmatically and empathetically, myself as the end user, I felt that I wanted a place to go where I could see everything in one place, 24/7. I craved immediate access, and we're all spoilt, and we want this culture of immediate gratification. And so there was the very clear opportunity. There was a white space between the larger auction houses that were focusing on the upper end of the market, the uber luxury, and the eBays of the world that were essentially bringing a great market for volume, but that didn't have the taste and the trust factors to sell with conviction items of rarity and artworks. So we entered in through that door and saw that space.
And what have you seen in the years since you've launched? I mean, how is your customer buying art? Is it different from the old guard auction houses? Do they have a different approach? What are they buying?
So I think there are two types. I think in many ways, luxury today is about being versus having. And I think there are these new collectors who are seeing in many ways that the new Birkin bag is the Kusama print. They're buying, these new entrants are buying branded artists, and artists through this day and age of improved visual acuity and the greater advent and greater popularization of artists, to understanding who these artists are. There's greater education. The most popular artist in the world happens to be Banksy by recognition. So people are coming in through these more accessible forums, through street art, through photography. So new collectors want to buy into these big brand names. The more established collectors are essentially becoming more eclectic. I think they are venturing out into new realms. Collectors understand with time that your collection is an impartation of your identity. It is a physical identity that lives beyond you. And there is this greater eclecticism. I think a national hero in this country is Axel Verwoerd, who is teaching people about how to mix genres and geographies and types and eras. And some of the greatest collectors in the world, we're not quite in the day and age yet of the IKEA furniture with the Rothko, but you're seeing people mix books and tribal masks and and antiquities with great contemporary art. And when people can build a context and a purpose and a narrative around that, they're hitting the mark in terms of taste and collecting style.
Laura, your job is both a mediator and an advisor, often between different generations of super wealthy clients. Who are the people that are buying things from Padelette, from Saint Laurent? Are you seeing a difference in the generations and how they approach spending and what they're asking? Are they increasingly aware of what's going on in the world around them, of course, and how are they responding to that?
Yes, as you say, I'm more representing the wealth management industry, so it's not necessarily a question of spending, but it's more a question on how they protect and they grow their assets. And that's basically where we come in. And the question, what we see more and more is what they care about, is referring back to what you just said, is in how they leave a legacy. And there clearly, when we talk to the third generation or we talk to millennials, there is a big difference. And especially in the millennial, we see they become more and more close to topic related with philanthropy, with impact investment, so there is a debate that actually is going back to the first panel about how much they want to use of private wealth to basically give back to the public. And in that form, we as UBS, we try to remain authentic, so we are a wealth management industry where we are good at is actually wealth. But there is clearly a need for us to expand the way how we advise them. We need to become more holistic, and we need really to talk to them through their passion. And art is also playing a very big topic. Philanthropy, as I said, Sport Club is, for example, as well something they invest in, and it's a way for them exactly to go back to community. So it's a different balance of interest.
I guess what this all centers around then is the idea of status symbols, and it seems to me that the argument keeps going back and forth, that at one level, we were told that the day of bling is gone and that it's over, and then there's this idea at the next level that, like the most recent shows in Paris and Milan, the logo was everywhere. It was very clear that people wanted to relate to those logos and really associate themselves with tribes. So where are we in terms of status symbols? Are people proud to present their wealth, or is the new status symbol a philanthropic institution,
I think there are big differences culturally. So serving a global basis, clearly you see a difference in the way how the status symbol play a role in US or in Asia or in Europe. But at the end, the client we are dealing with, they are so passionate about the business, they are able to take really smart risk. And so they are not showing off. They are actually very humble, very practical in what they want to pursue. So I don't think they need to hide their wealth. And exactly by becoming, there is a concern about inequality, that's clear, and therefore they need to engage in activity that they make visible actually on how much they contribute. And we just did a recent study, we published this billionaire report where we could prove exactly that billionaires around the world actually engage around 28 million of employees. So this is comparable roughly to the working population of the UK, and that shows you the importance of how much actually they are there to support society. So I don't think they need to hide away, shy away from their wealth. They just need to use it smartly.
Francesca, you with status symbols too.
Yeah, we have a logo in the brand that is part of the heritage, and I think that everything goes back again of treating what are your assets with a lot of respect. In the past, very past, the 80s and 90s, logo had become a little bit treated without respect by brands, and like the only value that people should buy into to show off that they could afford it. In my view, when you have a logo, and you're super lucky as a brand because it's a way of making yourself recognizable, but you have to respect it. You cannot just simply pretend that people buy your product because there is a logo. Actually, whenever you use your logo, you have to think twice and making sure that the dignity behind the product that you are making recognizable through a logo is twice as valuable than what you stand for. Because I completely agree that probably today people don't buy a logo as a status symbol, but there is a community that buys a logo to basically communicate that they stand for the same value that you communicate as a brand. Mm-hmm. And again, you need to be respectful of who you are, communicate who you are, and engage with more and more people that share your value, which doesn't mean you need to engage or attract everybody, but more and more of the people that can relate to you. And I think that when a person decides to buy a product with a logo is because they respect today what the company that uses that logo stands for. It's not because they want to show that they can afford it. It's a different way. And in here, I have to say that the younger generation play a big role because they live much more as a community, and they stand as a community that goes lateral and is global, and it changes the boundaries. And they influence the older generations. I really believe in this.
So I guess in this kind of more fractured world then, do we think that luxury is becoming more inclusive or exclusive?
More inclusive, in
more
my
inclusive.
view. Yeah, still remaining luxury, still remaining aspirational. We are becoming more inclusive because we engage more people. And when we talk about client nowadays, it's not only the people who buy our product, are also the people that engage with the brand through social media, for example. I believe that a very small fraction of the people that follow Saint Laurent in the social media at the end of the day are clients of Saint Laurent. I honestly don't even care. Who they are people that want to engage with the brand and with what we communicate, no matter what. So your way of looking at what we call our client is very different than the past. Our clients are not only the people who buy the product, but are the people who want to engage with the brand. And you need to be aware of that. And your first client should be your employees. We talked before about sustainability and our role in communicating or not. The first people for which we should run our business in a sustainable way are our employees. Because the way we do things matter. It's not only the results. I'm very happy because we have good results, but I'm also very happy in the way we do it. And I would never compromise on the certain values of equality, for example, of fairness, on trying to do things in the right way to get a point more of EBIT. I mean,
Alexander, do you feel luxury more inclusive or exclusive at the moment?
Yeah, no, I think it's entirely more inclusive. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with Francesca. I mean, I think we live in a day and age where there is, finally, brands are no longer intimidated by embracing the more populist channels of social media, of digital outlets. I think everyone's realized that it is the first point of engagement today with most brands is via their digital channels. But brands have realized that it's no longer about being superficial through those channels. It's thinking about how do you communicate your heritage honestly and authentically and use those channels as a way of entertainment. And the millennials are playing a huge part in influencing how this new spirit of inclusion works against the grain of elitism, of the intimidation of the luxury of old.
And yet the world is becoming more and more unpredictable. I mean, there are lots of good results in the luxury market at the moment, but nearly every CEO continually says this is such a volatile market. You know, are you frightened to be operating in this market? Does it make you nervous when you see what's going on in the headlines, and then ultimately we know that we're sort of providing the trappings of luxury to clients?
I mean, clearly this new sort of wave of isolation has its certain fears and upheavals and uncertainties. I mean, in the US alone, we're seeing the lack of the reverse of the free flow of goods and people that creates a great degree of uncertainty. In China, with President Xi's decree on anti-corruption from 2012, people have moved away from buying exuberant gifts, and I think it's damaged more the sort of the luxury spirits and the luxury watch market. It's actually conversely somewhat helped the art market that plays more into sort of stealth wealth patterns where people can own things privately. The value is not immediately known. We see that in the art world there is still a sort of polarity of buyers. You have your Uber buyers who are buying at the Cy Twombly, the Rothko level, and then you have these new entrants. The artist is still, that there is more encouragement now to buy locally and to support your great domestic talent. And I think that is going to be further accentuated in this wave of more sort of isolationist government tactics.
Something, the buzzword of luxury is often authenticity, which can make a lot of people cringe, speaking plainly, especially journalists. But there is a question here of authenticity in this kind of world, and how much are you thinking about whether your clients feel like they can really relate to what you're talking about when you go about? I mean, for example, the Saint Laurent streetwear, which is amazing, but these trainers are extraordinarily high cost. These ripped tights are of very high value. So how do you reconcile that, or how do you think it reconciles itself in the mind of your consumer?
That's, in my opinion, is what you really should focus on. And when we talk about that authenticity, I really, really mean it. It means that you don't have to run after what other people do simply because you see it is working. It is very tempting. Looking at the others and seeing that the specific things that another brand is doing and apparently is bringing good results is tempting. Let's go there. But then you need to ask yourself, is this right for my brand or not? And if it's not, you should not go there. We are all, I wouldn't say frightened, but sometimes worried about what is going on in the world. And the days I'm more worried than others, I start thinking about, what are you worried about? This is what everybody is facing. So your role is trying to overcome better than the others, because at the end of the day, your good or bad performance depends on how much you can outperform or not outperform the market. So we try to stay focused on the things we can control, and clearly what we can control is our brand and the brand value, and trying to do everything to protect that. And this is what I mean for authenticity. I mean that when you shoot an advertising campaign, you ask yourselves, is this communicating my values or the values of someone else? And if it is communicating the values of someone else, or if it could be interpreted for the values of someone else, you simply don't do it. It's risky because you see a lot of proliferation in luxury of people doing a lot of the same and sometimes being successful, but for me, it's very much short term. In the long term, it pays off staying true to who you are all the time.
And presumably, though, when you take that approach, the design head, your creative director is incredibly important.
Totally. It's the most important asset that you have together with the brand, and you need to let it free to create. Of course, you need to have at the helm of the brand a creative director that naturally, like it's the case for Saint Laurent with Anthony Vaccarello, naturally embraces the values of the brand. It doesn't do it in a forced way, but it does it very naturally. But at the same time, can bring something new. And the fact that there is this synchrony between the two makes me feel very confident that whatever Anthony decides to do, even if it doesn't seem related to the brand, at the end of the day is going to be. And we need to make sure that we remain luxury. All this talking about the millennials and luxury going more democratic, it can be also very risky because we risk of, as an industry, to lose our identity. Our identity is the one of creating trends, is the one of creating fashion, and it's the one of making people desire and to remain aspirational. Like you said, we do streetwear, but it's expensive streetwear. It's luxury streetwear. It's not fast fashion streetwear. And this is what we need to remain. And I think you saw our show, and that was a stand that we made very strongly. Luxury is luxury. Fashion has to be up here, and it is something that not everybody can do. In fact, the creative director are a handful of people. There are many more CEOs than good creative directors. So you need to make sure that you remain there and you are not tracked down. Otherwise, there's not anymore any difference between fashion and luxury and fast fashion. And in my view, the two industries can exist and they are both legitimate if each and every one of us plays the role that we are supposed to have. Creating trends, taking risks, creating fashion, and the fast fashion coming after, and democratize even more what you're talking about.
It's quite interesting that 5 years ago, sort of the accessible luxury market was the sort of much touted area of the industry. And in fact, that's the area that's come under a lot of pressure. As you said, there was a drive to make product more accessible. And actually, if you're looking at the returns, it seems that people are either going one way or the other.
Exactly, and like you have the people buying very expensive art and buying more entry price, the same is happening, but we need to make sure that we don't go too much down, otherwise we lose who we are and we destroy both industries. I prefer people to mix and match than going too much down.
Are you the same, Alexander, in terms of mixing and matching?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think we all need to sort of play a role in this eclecticism. I think each brands need to be specialists today. We need to do very well, be very focused, not be all things to all people in terms of our identity, in terms of our price points. I think luxury is still very much about the dream, everything that's sort of antithetical to the rationale. But today, the codes and the needs and the way that we sell have changed. Experience has to be paramount and key. The type of experience has changed. The honesty of experience. I was talking over the weekend about how the best restaurant in the world this year, 11 Madison, won out purely because of how they personalize their experience. They have a team of dream catchers who listen to the guests around their table and will pick out key notes of conversation. They have one of their famous examples was a family from Costa Rica. The young daughter was there, kept looking out at the snow over New York, never seen snow before. At the end of lunch, they came and presented a hand-illustrated book of this young girl seeing snow for the first time. They took her down to the car. There was a car waiting, and they said, "Sir, madam, we want you to take your daughter to Central Park, and there's a toboggan, there's a sledge in the back of the car. Go and enjoy the snow." And that type of elevation of dream is sort of key to how we continue to permeate the desire and the aspiration of luxury.
And that rarefied world, though, is only available to a relative kind of few. So when you look at the sort of state in the last year of the US, for example, how closely are you looking at the headlines on a day-to-day basis in terms of, what you do and how you drive your business?
I think, look, we have to remain very. My business is very different to the 11 Madison business. I think, we have to sort of we sell brands that very much play and are relevant and a part of that ecosystem. But we are selling at price points that can be everything from a few $100s to a few $1,000s. We're helping people buy into this world of dream and aspiration at much lower price points. And we've been very focused on remaining within that realm. We're not trying to go into the Uber realm of mega rarities. We're selling to Laura's clients. We want to help people enter this market, which has previously been intimidating and highly exclusive.
Laura, I know you can't sort of speak to individuals, but in the last year, have you noticed an uptick in the number of your clients, I guess, who have been more concerned about what's going on in the world? Do you feel like they want to evolve the way that they spend and present themselves in reaction to news events, or not really?
I mean, the clients we are serving, they're global citizens, actually. So they live, especially because we are dealing with families, so multicultural, multi-generational family living across the globe. So concern related about the global economy, definitely there. Concern related with a specific market, less, because they are less dependent.
Right.
So they are so mobile, their wealth is very mobile, that they are less actually at the moment concerned in regards to individual market taking specific action. But overall, I mean, the global wealth of billionaires has actually increased substantially last year. I mean, increased 70%. So we see a substantial increase as well in our business, and we take it from there. I mean, but it's slightly different in terms of what I'm doing than where you are in, and clearly protectionism and U.S. politics clearly have an impact on the volatility of the market and geopolitical situation. So yes and no. I mean, we need to recognize there is a concern, but it does not necessarily have an impact on behavior.
I'm going to ask you guys one more question, but then we'll go to the floor for other questions. I guess, no one has a crystal ball. No one knows what's going to happen, tomorrow, let alone in the next 12 months. But, particularly to Francesca and Alexander, how will you protect your business in the next 12 months from these global fluctuations? What are the best pieces of advice that you can give to the floor? And also any mistakes that you've learned from in the last 2 years as well?
Well, I can answer on mistakes. I mean, I think we're a very young business. We're 6 years old. We constantly have to, in finding niches, have to take risks and think about how we build sustainability and growth. And we're a venture-backed business, and there are always pressures from investors. We made a very ill-fated judgment last year to grow quicker, to grow faster, to have more geographical expansion. We merged with a company in Germany. It didn't pan out well. We had to go, they went under, we did a management buyback, we carved ourselves back to become independent again. And again, I think that was just us thinking too far ahead of not understanding how to preserve our own culture, identity, build a brand in a very focused manner, protect yourselves for the long run, be a sustainable company, work on your own dream, focus on your own mission and goal, not try and be everywhere and nowhere, and be inch wide, mile deep, not mile wide and inch deep.
Yeah, I think that the advice that I give to myself more than anybody else looking at the mirror is that this globalization forces us to go even more local, in the sense that you need to be, exactly for what Laura said, the client today is much more mobile. Depending on what is happening in the political scene or terrorist attacks or the currency or the exchange rates, they shop everywhere. Even the same client travels much more. So focusing on locals and making sure that you are relevant on your local market, that you look at your business on a comp level, I mean, same number of stores, it's a better way to protect yourself from the fact that those people that travel around will always shop you, no matter where they prefer to shop you. And this, again, goes back to protecting the brand and communicating your brand values. If you have a strategy for, let's talk about the millennial, but let's talk about the Chinese. No? Instead of talking about age, we talk about nationalities. If a company has a strategy of selling to the Chinese who travel, if you're managing Europe and you're focusing on your price point over there and the spread with China because the Chinese so buy over there, bam, the terrorist attack arrives in Europe and they all disappear. If you don't engage them with the brand, when they disappear, you lose them to someone else. So the way to engage with the special nationality is to engage with them at home. And then wherever they go, they shop you. So this globalization, in my view, forces all of us to become even more locals in terms of the strategies that we are implementing. And in terms of learning from the mistakes, it's really this one. It's like even in the moment when you are growing, trying to always identify in the companies what is not working perfectly, because actually it's when things are going well that you can solve the issues being a little bit more relaxed. Because if you only tackle them when things are not going well, then you create a sort of panic. And if in a company you create panic, it never works. So this experience to me comes more from before Saint Laurent, but I try to apply it in the company every day. So I'm a little bit of looking at what doesn't work freak than enjoying what works well.
We've got time for one or two questions. Is there anyone with a question? No, which is quite lucky because we're running out of time. Okay, well, in which case, thank you very much. And I'm going to call Vanessa and Bill onto the stage for the next session. Thank you.